of items. They have the inability to discard those items. Physically discarding those items, you will see a physical reaction to that. They will have a physical reaction to discarding items. They are also not able to set boundaries on their acquisitions, and because the value that they place on those items is not monetary, it is emotional. So they're not able to set those boundaries. I'm sorry? People with hoarding disorder, this is actually the DSM definition. It's I was very excited. This was not in the DSM until 2015, hoarding disorder. It was up until then one line in obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and that line stated may show signs of hoarding disorder. But they never actually said what that was. So in 2015, it actually became its own diagnosis. And the definition in that is a persistent difficulty discarding or parting with possessions, regardless of their actual value. This difficulty is due to a perceived need to save the items and distress associated with discarding them. The difficulty discarding possessions results in an accumulation, which substantially compromises the intended use of an area. If living areas are uncluttered, it's most likely because a third party has come in to intervene. So what that means is when somebody with hoarding disorder has a clean space, and it is an active disorder, they are not in remission, they are not working towards treatment. If that space is clean, that is because a third party has come in, whether that is a spouse or family members, or even a nonprofit organization may come in and help clean out. This hoarding actually causes significant clinical distress and impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. As a guess, how many days a month do you think somebody that works full-time with hoarding disorder actually misses? Anybody have a guess?
5.
More than 5.
There's a couple guesses in the chat.
10 to 15.
10 to 15, that's actually pretty close. It's between 7 and 15. So rock on. Yes, they miss between 7 and 15 days a month of work. And it is not due to anything other than the fact that it is exceptionally difficult to get ready for your day. Somebody with hoarding disorder suffers from extreme anxiety also. And what happens is when they're trying to get ready for work and they have to go through all of their items to get ready, a lot of people with hoarding disorder struggle because they don't have access to their shower or access to their toilet or access to clean clothes or food. A lot of them, if they have a vehicle, the vehicle is full. So getting places in a very full vehicle can be challenging. And once you start doing all of that for your morning routines are hard enough to begin with. But to add all of that extra to it, it becomes too much and they can't go. So people with hoarding disorder will eventually lose their jobs or have to drop down to part-time or less. Hoarding disorder, as long as it is not medically attributed to another condition. So people with traumatic brain injury, you'll see people with traumatic brain injury show signs of hoarding disorder, but it's not necessarily hoarding disorder. They may need to relearn how to clean or relearn how to organize or dispose of items. The same goes for people with dementia or Alzheimer's. They may show signs of hoarding disorder, but it's not actually hoarding disorder. It's a side effect of the dementia. And hoarding disorder will only be a disorder if it is not better explained by another mental disorder, such as obsessive compulsive disorder or obsessive compulsive personality disorder. What happens when you have OCD is that you are stuck on your routines. And if you cannot accomplish your routine, you don't follow through with that task. For instance, I worked with a gentleman who it took him about 3 hours to wash his dishes because he had to wash each item 3 different times and then dry it and then wash it again. And then before he put it in the cabinet, he had to pull the other items out of the cabinet and then wash those. And that happened every time he washed his dishes. So his dishes would pile up because you don't always have 3 hours to spend washing your dishes. And I've seen the same thing with books. A lot of times you'll get a big pile of books because they need to sort those books by author, by book size, whatever their compulsion requires of them. And if they don't have the time to do it, they don't do that task if they don't have the time to fulfill their ritualistic needs. Okay, so we're going to hop into the stages of hoarding disorder. There are 5 different stages of hoarding disorder. If you've ever seen the show Hoarders on A&E, I don't know if it still airs, but when it was, those are typically stage 4 or stage 5. When you walk into a hoarded home, 9 times out of 10, you are not going to see that. That's what gets the views. That's what is exciting to people. It is not your typical situation. That is the very top percent of people with hoarding disorder. Stage 1, most people don't even acknowledge this as hoarding disorder because all of the stairways, hallways, doorways, all of that is accessible. All the amenities in the home are accessible and working. They have functioning bathrooms, they have clean clothes. All the family members and pets, they're healthy, clean, and well nourished. They've maintained their finances at this point. They still invite people over. They may feel a little anxious about their clutter, but it doesn't really affect their day-to-day lives. I look at it kind of like when you're personally having company over and you do that flight of the bumblebee, quick clean before people come in, because you're worried about, people perceiving your house in a certain way. That's how they feel. They're just not able to do that flight of the bumblebee clean. At this stage, this is where those hoarding habits are formed, where they start to develop that comfort feeling from acquiring and maintaining items. And as I said before, they're not typically seen as somebody who hoards. I kind of refer to it as a messy college dorm room is kind of what it looks like. You can see that there's some stacks of papers, there's clutter on the floor, some mess. Definitely looks like it could be tidied, but it doesn't look horrible. Stage 2, this is not typically the stage we see when we're in this field. It is the stage I would like to see people at, number 1 and number 2. But at this point, other authorities have not been involved yet at this point. At stage 2, there are some safety issues starting to arise. One exit to the house might be blocked, or one room might be unusable. I kind of think of it like this. Most people have a junk drawer or a catch-all area where all those little bits and bobs that we don't know what to do with, or like half-dead batteries, go to live. People with hoarding disorder in stage 2 will have an entire room dedicated to something like that. They're starting to pay less attention to housekeeping, and dishes are piling up and shelves are remaining dusty. And we're not talking like, oh no, I haven't I haven't dusted my house in 2 weeks because I've been busy with work. This is the kind of dust where you run your finger along and you can actually get like a dust ball. One major appliance most likely is not working, and they can't have somebody to come in and fix it because they can't get to it, or they're embarrassed to have somebody see how they're living, so they don't actually have anybody come over to fix it. So in this stage is when the house starts to come into that disrepair. If they have pets, you're going to smell the pets. If it's a cat, you're most likely smell a dirty kitty box. If it's dog, you may smell, the house may smell like dog. Um, and at this point, they're going to start focusing on their clutter and not actual life. Because hoarding disorder is a trauma-based disorder, it's a trauma-based coping mechanism. People start to turn to their items because people in their lives have hurt them in a way that they can no longer trust people. So those items then become the substitution for having people in their lives. If you think about it, an item is not going to hurt you. An item is not going to belittle you. An item is not going to leave you. You have complete and utter control over that item, where it goes, what it does, how long you have it, whether you're holding it or not holding it, something that you cannot have with an actual person. So they really start to focus on that aspect. They start to reduce the amount of company they have over because they are embarrassed. They know that the living situation they are in is not healthy. They are fully aware. And they are fully aware that other people do not live like this. So they actually become extremely embarrassed of the situation that they're in. But because their mental health requires that they keep those items, they start to cut people out because that's just easier to do. Emotionally, they are starting to have mild anxiety, mild depression at this point. It's becoming harder to leave the house. Getting up and doing your day-to-day, not only because it is hard due to the items, but because it's hard when you start to go into that spiral of, I can't leave my house, I can't have people over, I'm missing days at work. You start to feel that depression. It really starts to take hold. They're going to start to withdraw from their family. Family, particularly if you're in Pittsburgh, we are in your face all the time. And family tends to feel like they have no boundaries with each other. So they're going to say things like, you need to clean this crap up. You need to get rid of this junk. Why are you living like this? So they're going to start to pull away from their families because they don't want to hear that. They can't hear that right now. They're going to start to turn to their stuff as a substitute for interaction. Because you're going to get people saying things like, you need to clean, this is disgusting, are you lazy? It's all very derogatory towards the person with the suffering from the disorder. So their way of coping with that is to just start pulling away from the people that can't understand or accept their way of life. I look at it this way in terms of items. When you are younger and you're a child, every child knows that the safest place you can be when you are scared is under your blanket or under your comforter. And a lot of times when you're little, you don't call your parents, you just go underneath that blanket for that security. Individuals with hoarding disorder treat their items like that security blanket. They hold on to them, they surround themselves with it, and it is to keep themselves safe because the interactions they have had with other human beings have been so negative. And at this point, as they're starting to shift from stage 2 to stage 3, they're going to start leaning towards justification rather embarrassment from having their items, because they continually get that negative reinforcement. It almost becomes like a, well, just because you don't like it doesn't mean that I can't. And they start to justify having all of those items with them. This is the like the junk room of a stage 2. If you look out into the hallway, you can kind of see into the hallway that area is clear. There's some clutter, but it is clear. This room has become their catch-all. Stage 3, the signs of hoarding actually become evident to the outside world. This is the stage where you're going to get code enforcement that's going to start getting involved. Most likely some form of social services will be involved, particularly if the individual is elderly. You are going to see structural damage to the home. This may be minor structural damage, like crumbling plaster or broken outlet plates, maybe some damaged doors or doorways. But it's not dangerous structural damage, but it is there. And if it is not taken care of, it will eventually lead to dangerous structural damage. Indoor items will most likely be stored or tossed outside. Once they start running out of room inside, it moves outside. There's evidence of power cables and phone lines to keep things operating when outlets are blocked off. This is actually known as spaghetti. So you may have somebody that wants to watch TV in the dining room, but all the outlets in their dining room are blocked. So they run an extension cord from the living room to the dining room. Most likely, because of the amount of items, they'll run it from window to window outside of the home. So you'll actually see extension cords hanging outside of windows. If you look at a house and you notice that the blinds are like pressed up against the window, it's most likely a hoarded home and it is stage 3 or higher. If they have pets, there are fleas, there are stains, you will smell the ammonia. If you walk into a home and you can smell the ammonia, be very, very careful. I would probably meet with the person outside. Long-term exposure to ammonia, even from urine, can cause severe damage to internal organs and your respiratory system. The sink is filled with dirty dishes. There's probably standing water. It's gonna smell. It's not gonna smell great. It's gonna smell though. Stairs and walkways are generally overtaken and difficult to navigate. This is when people start actually walking on items or fallen papers because they no longer pick those items up. Individuals with hoarding disorder suffer from something called clutter blindness. Once an item leaves their hand, it becomes part of the background and they can no longer see it, whether it's in a pile, on a shelf, or on the floor. It is no longer part of something that they can see within their range of vision. Outside storage, if there is a shed or garage, is overflowing. So the first response from somebody with hoarding disorder, once their house fills up, is to put items either Oh, sorry about that. Can you still hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Their first course is to take those items that no longer fit in their home and put them into an outside storage, either unit or garage. I've known people suffering from a hoarding disorder that have had 5 storage units. They were actually going broke and going to end up homeless because they were spending all of their money to store their items in storage lockers. Once those outside storage areas are full, that's when things start accumulating on porches and in the yard. They're going to start to neglect their personal care at this point, not because they don't want to bathe or shower or brush their teeth, but because they can't actually get to those spaces. It is not uncommon to see clothes hanging from shower racks or toilets being used as storage. Like on the top of the commode. The bathtub is also a place where they fill it up with items. So in order to shower, use the toilet, or brush their teeth, they're going to have to actually move all of those items just to reach that area. Getting clean clothes is very difficult at this stage, and it only gets harder. They may go out at this point and just buy new clothes rather than washing because they can't get to their washer and dryer, or their washer and dryer is broken. They're going to start to eat reheated, pre-cooked, or fast food because the kitchen is only borderline functional. If you don't have any counter space, you can't really prepare meals. If you can't access your stove or oven, you can't really heat up meals. Um, so what happens now is that they start to gain weight. Their activity is reduced due to the amount of items. They are eating unhealthy foods, and they are suffering from anxiety and depression. When you combine all of that, they gain weight very quickly. That then leads to issues with diabetes, heart disease, different respiratory issues, because now they're in a home full of dust, potentially ammonia, not able to exercise, not having a good healthy diet. And it really starts to take a toll on their physical body. A lot of individuals with hoarding disorder also complain of chronic pain. And I don't know if that's from the amount of things that they have to do in order to do one single action in their lives, or if it's related to the depression. But one of the major things that individuals with hoarding disorder suffer from is chronic pain. They also suffer from insomnia. Their sleeping habits are actually reversed. So during the night, they typically stay up. They'll fuss around with their items, and then they go to bed in the early morning hours. Some of that has to do with infestations. A lot of infestations are more active at night. So it's harder for them to sleep. They may have also developed the habit of going out in the evening to gather items from dumpsters or curbsides when people are not awake, to say, hey, don't take that. So they actually shift their sleeping patterns based on that. I'm sorry, I'm just now seeing some of these questions. I apologize. For stage 2, if you offer to help clean their house, you have to be very, very careful. They may say, hey, help me clean. And then during that cleaning process, they may actually stop and say, hey, I can't do this. And you need to be very cognizant of that. I strongly suggest working with somebody to help clean, but have them do the throwing out. Hoarding disorder is actually assessed in, I'm sorry, actually, let me read this. When you're working with an individual in a clinical setting, how is hoarding disorder assessed, since it's visual external manifestation and is not viewed by the clinician? Typically, when you work with somebody with hoarding disorder, they may not straight out say, I have hoarding disorder. That may take a couple of sessions for that to come out, because it is very embarrassing for the person. One of the things we do in office settings is we ask for photographs. Maybe take a picture on your phone to show me, is there an area that you want to work on? Maybe it's cleaning off your stove. Let's take a picture of the stove and maybe talk about some of the things on there and what we can do with them. Because it is a visual thing, and that anxiety that comes up typically is associated to the visual and physical aspect of the disorder. You absolutely have to have pictures. Otherwise, they will tell you that they're working on it, and they are not. So that if you can actually also hook them up with some in-home services, people with hoarding disorder could really use the assistance in-home. The person from in-home needs to understand they may not be allowed in the home for the first 2-3 sessions. They may need to meet with them outside of the home, because people with hoarding disorder are very untrusting, and for just cause. Okay, this is in stage 3 is when the hoarding disorder really starts to affect their work life, their jobs, their personal lives. People with hoarding disorder, when they go to work, they may have an odor, and that may get brought up. At stage 3 or higher, they most likely will have an odor to them, whether it's because their clothes haven't been able to be cleaned or they personally haven't been able to be cleaned. And finances are starting to become an issue. They may still have their job, but they may start missing out on paying bills, not because they don't want to, but because of that clutter blindness. They may take that bill, set it on a pile, and it is now gone. And within a day or two, it's going to get covered by something else. And now that bill is gone. They're not able to pay because they no longer have the bill to do so. Most people with hoarding disorder that I have worked with, because of their distrusting nature, don't do auto pay on the bank. They prefer to do handwritten checks. At this point, family has tried to clean up on multiple occasions, and they have been rejected. And there's a good possibility that they're ready to or have already washed their hands of the situation. Because when you work with an individual with hoarding disorder and you trigger that anxiety response, they get angry. They get aggressive, whether it would be verbally or physically. They will become aggressive if you start to just pull items out, saying, we have to clean, we have to do this. This is the back porch of a stage 3. You can see that there's clothes, appliances, there's crutches and extension cords and all kinds of things that no longer fit inside the home. And they needed a place to store it. Stage 4 is where you're going to see a lot of structural damage. The home is becoming dangerous. It is not condemnable yet, but it is on its way. It is not uncommon to walk into a stage 4 home and see floors and ceilings that might be sagging. Does anybody know why the floors and ceilings might be sagging?
Because of the weights, because of other issues.
Absolutely, yes. Homes actually do have a weight limit. And when you combine excess weight with lack of maintenance in a home, you will start to see things like absolutely liquid damage, lack of maintenance, weight, burst pipes, leaks, and it will sag the house. You may actually be able to see that sagging from the outside. I walked up to a house and it was actually slanted because the majority of the stuff was on the one side of the home. There will be mold, there will be bugs, there will be spider webs or cobwebs. The most common bug I see are those little fruit flies or gnats. They typically have fly paper hanging to catch them. But I have seen other infestations such as bed bugs, cockroaches, maggots, spiders, mice. When you work with somebody with hoarding disorder, those infestations have to stay until you clean out enough stuff that an exterminator can come in and do their job. In order for that to happen, they have to be able to get to the baseboards of the home, and around that, they have to be able to get to the beds, the basement.
Can these infestations cause issues to neighboring homes?
Absolutely. Absolutely, they can. If you are in a row house, that entire row will most likely get infected or infested. Particularly if you're in a neighborhood and you have items outside, you get snakes, you get mice, you get rats, and those can actually go over into neighboring homes, just like mice and bed bugs, cockroaches. They can all transfer. When you're working with somebody in a hoarding situation, you as the person that may go in the home should really be protected with PPE. personal protective equipment. The one that I have found the most effective for working in infestated homes, they're actually booties that go up to your knees. So as long as you don't sit down and you have the booties up to your knees, you won't actually bring those critters home with you, because you can take those booties off, put them in a Ziploc baggie, and dispose of them appropriately. And maintaining your personal hygiene when you're working with somebody with hoarding disorder is extremely important. So if you walk into an infestation, when you get home, those clothes have to come off and go right into the I do the dryer hot, the washer hot, and then the dryer again, because that's the best way to handle bed bugs, in case I accidentally brought one of those little buggers home. If you have a bag, don't take the bag in the home. I've actually brought mice home in my work bag. That was exciting to drop my bag off at the house and then mice jumped out. So you have to be very careful because infestations do actually transfer. At this point, there will be rotten food in the kitchen. If you have a weak stomach or are not able to handle strong smells, do not open the refrigerator. The refrigerator will have the most rotted items in it. It will not be uncommon to find bags of like water lettuce rather than lettuce, moldy, expired items. You're going to probably start to see cans that are bulging or that have been chewed through by rats, and that are emptying on the shelves at stage 4. Major appliances do not work. They cannot be accessed for repair. And they're going to start using their appliances for storage. One of the biggest storage item or areas I have found is the oven. They store important paperwork in the oven, like the house deed, the car title, social security number. My assumption is because it is fireproof, but they'll use the items or the oven for storage. I've seen microwaves used for storage, dishwashers used for storage, showers where your clothes are hanging on the shower rod. The actual tub is full of items. The house is truly dangerous at this point. It is not condemnable, but it is dangerous. When you walk through, you will most likely be going through what we call goat trails. That is a small path through walls of items. Those items are precariously perched, so bumping into them could cause them to fall over. So you do need to be careful if you are going in home. The individual suffering from hoarding disorder starts to stay in what I call a cockpit. So it is one area, usually a chair or the bed, somewhere where they basically live their entire lives. They eat, sleep. I did say goat trails, yes. Like when you go to the mountains and you see those small thin trails from the goats, that is what happens inside the home. It is not uncommon to have to turn sideways to walk through. But they live in what is called the cockpit. They sleep there, they eat there, they watch TV there, they do their daily activities there. All of their needed daily items are actually surrounding that area. You will see empty bottles of pop, full bottles of pop, chips, snacks, the TV remote, a book, and it is all sat on top of other things. So it is all very easily reachable. And they are no longer washing clothes at all at this point. They are either wearing dirty clothes or they are buying new clothes to replace the dirty clothes. If they are bathing, it is most likely in a sink. I did actually work with a woman who had to bathe with her hose outside because she could not get to any running water within the home. If they have not quit their job, they are struggling and most likely will lose their job very, very soon. The phone is going to be ringing constantly from bill collectors, and then everything is going to, yes, definitely a bird bath. their utilities are going to start getting shut off at this point, whether it's because they no longer have the money to pay those bills, because those bills are in such high arrears that there's no way they can afford it, or because they keep losing the bill and can't pay for it. Or it could even possibly be that something in the home needs repaired, like the water heater or the furnace or anything like that. And because they can't get somebody to come in and repair those items, they then lose that utility. If they have pets, they have started to die or run away. In hoarding disorder cases that are strictly animal hoarding, the way to gauge the stage of an animal hoard is the amount of feces, the amount of ammonia, and the amount of dead animals in the home. If they have a large number of animals in the home, do not be surprised to see those animals in a very sickly condition, whether they are malnourished or have medical needs that are not being met. An individual with hoarding disorder towards animals is not able to see those issues come up. They truly believe that they are giving that animal the best possible home they could give that animal. And at this point, they have pretty much shut everybody out of their lives because they can't accept their hoarding disorder, or they're embarrassed of that hoarding disorder, or those people have wronged them in some sort of way that the person with the disorder feels that they can no longer trust them. They will also start talking about their past or an unrealistic future. They will live in either the past or an unrealistic future because the right now feels so bleak to them. They can't have a job, they can't have friends, they can't do their day-to-day functions without falling over things. They're suffering from chronic food poisoning. Their current life is very, very bleak. So they start talking about things in the past. Now, they may actually romanticize their past. For instance, maybe their dad took them fishing one day when they were younger. Well, they focus on that one day, and that becomes their entire past with their father. Like, my dad and I would always go fishing, and when we would go fishing, we would do this, and when we would go fishing, we would do that. And they focus on that really happy moment and that happy time. And you'll start to see that their items are actually geared towards and around those happy moments. I had an individual that would collect the plastic cups from McDonald's, like the big drink cups, because when her daughter was younger, she would take her daughter to ballet. And then every time after ballet, they would stop at McDonald's, get a drink, and share one of the big cups, one of the big drinks with their meals. So as her daughter grew up and no longer spoke to her, because of the hoarding situation, the client started collecting McDonald's cups because it reminded her of those happy times with her daughter after ballet. And she truly felt like if she got rid of those cups, she was throwing away the memory of her and her daughter and that fun time that they had. Their unrealistic future. Their unrealistic future. Individuals with hoarding disorder are very, very creative. They're actually probably the most creative people you will ever meet. They're incredibly creative, and their minds function in a way that is almost enviable, because they can see one thing and make, in their minds, they can make a million things from that one thing. So when they have their unrealistic future, they're actually incorporating their items into that future. An individual may collect computer parts and have decided that if they collect enough of these computer parts, they can make the world's fastest computer. And then NASA will want that computer because it is the fastest and most efficient computer. And then they will have all the money they ever needed because they have sold this computer to NASA. And they fixate on that future, or whichever future they have created based on their need and their items. Does anybody have any questions so far?
I have a question, Kira.
Yeah.
Do Do people tend to move at like a specific timeline from one stage to another, or is it very individual?
It's very individual based on trauma.
Okay.
So you may have somebody that may be in stage 1 for 90% of their lives. And then something happens and they jump straight from a stage 1 to a stage 3 or 4. Because of whatever the trauma was. Because hoarding disorder actually has a genetic link. You may suffer from hoarding disorder or those tendencies and never actually present based on your trauma coping mechanisms. And that is a stage 4 kitchen. When you are working in a stage 4 kitchen, the very first thing I suggest working with is removing items from the stove, particularly if the stove is still functional. Their kitchens at stage 4, well, their entire house at stage 4, but primarily their kitchen, because there are open flames in a kitchen, is extremely dangerous. And if a house that is hoarded catches on fire, there is nothing that you can do but let it burn. It cannot be put out, and it is too dangerous for firefighters to go in and try to save anything. The best they can do is protect the properties around the hoarded home. Stage 5, this is the one you see on TV. There's major structural damage to the house. 9 times out of the 10, house in stage 5 will be condemned. It is not safe for human habitation. There's going to be severe mold, strong odors. These odors are the odors you can smell before you actually enter the home. You can smell them from the street. There will be bugs, there will be rodents, there will be cobwebs. If there are animals, there will be high levels of ammonia, there will be high levels of feces in the home. The home is biohazardous at this point. There are walls of items in every room. There are going to be parts of the house that are completely blocked off with items. It is not uncommon. It is not uncommon for somebody with hoarding disorder to just start chucking stuff. Like if they have a basement and the basement fills up, they'll just start chucking it down the stairs until those stairs are filled up and you can no longer access the basement. They are literally only eating fast food or expired foods or generic foods because they no longer have any money. They don't have an income. The money they have is most likely going towards their items, whether it is storage containers or acquiring new items. They will spend their entire day struggling to complete simple tasks like eating, sleeping, or going to the bathroom. It may take the average individual with hoarding disorder 5 to 10 minutes to even get to the toilet and in order to use it. So they actually have to plan their day around their items. So if they know it's going to take them 10 minutes to clear off the toilet for them to use it, they will start their bathroom routine 10 minutes before they actually have to go. Yeah, I actually I want to talk about this. Your aunt. I worked with a woman. She was one of the most wonderful women I have ever met. You would go to her house, and the outside of her house looked like it should have been featured in Home and Gardens. She was the sweetest woman you ever meet. She was out in her yard constantly working on her flower beds and her gardens, and she made sure her lawn was manicured, and she would have people come and take care of all of that. The minute you walked in her house, though, it was filled from top to bottom with things. And most of it was based on her memory. She was starting to suffer from memory loss. Now, the hoarding had started before the memory loss, but it got worse after she started having memory loss because she would set things down and forget that she already had them and go out and buy them again, or just forget where her stuff was, or she'd leave things out because if she put it away, she would forget that she had it. So hoarding disorder is one of those disorders that it's very, very sad because people spend so much time trying to hide what they have and the issues that they have because of the negative responses that they've had in the past, or the embarrassment from it. Uh, it's not like other mental disorders where somebody with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia may go to work every day, may live a fully functional life, may have people over on a regular basis, and still function, even though they have a mental health disorder. Somebody with hoarding disorder cannot do that. They can't have somebody come over, and the medication regimen for hoarding disorder has not been figured out yet. So what they're doing is treating portions. So they'll treat the depression or they might treat the anxiety, but it doesn't actually affect the entire disorder. So even on medication, somebody with hoarding disorder most likely will not be able to live the same style life as somebody else might. Their family and friends are deeply concerned. This is when, particularly if it's a senior individual, area agency on aging or any senior care will most likely remove the individual from the home because it is not safe for them. They're in serious financial trouble. City or county officials most likely have been contacted. If not, they are going to be contacted soon. The depression is so severe at this point that the individual with hoarding struggles to get out of bed each day. Not even just to clean, but literally to get up and live their lives is a struggle. They tend to actually be confused. It's called clutter confusion. And they start saving items for people who are no longer living or that aren't the same or the age that they remember. Because they're cutting people out of their lives, they no longer have that same sense of time. So maybe they have a granddaughter, and the last time they saw their granddaughter, she was 4 years old, but because the house has gotten so bad, the daughter will no longer bring the granddaughter over. So it's been 15 years and the individual with hoarding disorder is still buying their granddaughter things appropriate for a 4-year-old. They start to forget what they're doing, what process they were in the middle of, because their brain is being constantly stimulated from all the items that they're seeing. They cannot focus enough to do any one task the whole way through. This individual is no longer going to leave their home. They stay at home almost 100% of the time once they hit stage 5. The only reason they would leave their home is to move to their car to sleep, move to a tent to sleep, or go to a homeless shelter. I actually worked with a family who had so much clutter and such a severe bed bug infestation that they were sleeping in tents in their backyard. They would use the home solely to get clothes or food, but their life was spent living in their backyard. This is a stage 5. If you can see, his head is pretty much up at the ceiling. And that is him standing on a couple feet of stuff. all of those items, I don't know if you can see, there's about 12 pairs of crutches, like 14 umbrellas. This is not uncommon for a stage 5. This is most likely what you would walk into. Walking on the actual floor in a stage 5 is not something that's going to happen. You're either going to have a layer of papers or a layer of items that you are physically going to be walking on. If you go in home into a hoarded home, do not wear open-toed shoes. It is not uncommon for chemicals to have spilled in the home. I actually lost a pair of sneakers to a hoard. I was working with a woman and she had some kind of rust remover chemical in her kitchen and it had spilled over. And the bottom of my shoe got eaten away. So I was very glad that I had closed-toed shoes on. What is the history of hoarding disorder? The history of hoarding disorder is actually very, very interesting. There have been recorded cases of hoarding disorder as far back as ancient Egypt. During the Great Depression, we created different coping mechanisms and skills that aren't actually hoarding. We do make jokes about saving foil and string. Buttons are a big one. Button boxes, button tins, because buying new shirts was so expensive. So we may actually still have some of those things like the buttons. I actually have my great grandmother's button tin, which I've never used a button out of it, but we keep them because it's the Great Depression buttons. But it actually does not necessarily have anything to do with consumption and consumer culture. It has made the disorder easier to have, but it has been recorded all the way back as far as ancient Egypt. Okay, so interacting with somebody with hoarding disorder is not super easy. There are a lot of things that you have to keep in mind. The individual with hoarding disorder must always feel like they are in control. They have to. The disorder is specifically triggered by a trauma in which they have felt that they have lost all of their control. Some of the most traumatic stories I have heard in my career as a human service worker have been from hoarding disorder clients. The things that they have lived through are incredible, and the fact that the only thing they're doing is keeping an excessive amount of items, to me, is amazing. Another thing that you need to do when you work with somebody with hoarding disorder is to set obtainable, realistic goals. An individual with an advanced case of hoarding disorder is most likely never going to live in a perfectly clean home or a home that we would consider perfectly clean. We need to understand that everybody lives in a different way, and they may be perfectly comfortable with having their bookshelves and other shelves completely piled up, but can get to their stove. And that needs to be okay. A realistic goal for somebody with hoarding disorder may be, let's see if we can get all the paper items off the top of the stove. Great. Now let's see if we can keep it that way for a week. And that may be the goal you work on for a couple of weeks. So it has to be realistic. And you have to celebrate those wins. When they achieve that goal, celebrate that because it's really important. Another thing you have to do is you have to be patient. I tell people if they think they're patient, they're probably not patient enough. It is not uncommon for somebody with hoarding disorder to say they can do this, this, and this, and then back out of it very quickly. It is not uncommon for an individual with hoarding disorder to lose their temper or to cancel frequently for appointments. It is not uncommon for them not to let you into the home if you're working in home with them. It may take them, if you're working in an office, it may take them weeks to actually open up to you about having the disorder. Would this be related to OCD in a sense? It is very closely related to OCD. It used to be labeled as OCD, OCPD, but it actually has also different aspects to it based on the way it affects the brain. And because somebody with hoarding disorder may live in squalor, somebody with OCD doesn't typically do that. Their brains actually trigger differently too. Different parts of their brains light up when they are MRI'd. And OCD, although those rituals are calming, for hoarding disorder, it is specifically based on human interaction. So for OCD, it may be, they're worried about the door not being locked, so they lock it 8 times before they go to bed and then jiggle the handle another 15. Somebody with hoarding disorder, they may not lock their door because the door is covered by stuff. Their response to being afraid of a person is blocking that entry. But yeah, it is actually very closely related to OCD in the sense that it is an anxiety disorder. Maintaining trust is very, very important. What do you do if you never see the home and only see the client and they never admit to hoarding? You can actually direct friends and family to 211 or Allegheny Link, particularly if the individual is older. If you can't see the home and they don't admit to it, there is nothing as a clinician you can do. Other than just kind of roll with the client. If they feel comfortable enough with you after an amount of time, they may open up about it. You may even want to ask them, like, are there any issues that your friends and family think that may want to work on? Does any of that appeal to you? But that's part of the maintaining trust. If you go based on family and friends and not the person, that's going to break the trust and they're not going to want to work with you. So unfortunately, there's nothing we can do if they don't open up to us about it. Maintaining the trust also means keeping your word. If you're working with somebody and say you're in the office and you say, hey, bring me one item that you think you can part with, and I will hang on to it until our next session. And if you haven't needed it, maybe we talk about donating it. Well, when they come back for that next session, that item better be there. Because if it is not, there is going to be a major break of trust. And once that trust is broken with an individual with hoarding disorder, it cannot come back. It doesn't come back. You have to stay focused on the individual with hoarding and not the family's needs. Families are going to talk and they're going to come to you and they're going to tell you things like, we have to do this and this needs to happen. And it can't be based on family need. If the person is in danger, consider involving outside authorities like code enforcement or adult protective services. But if the person is not in danger, then the family's needs are one of the last things you have to take into account, because the individual with hoarding disorder has had severe trauma based on interpersonal relationships. They have to be in control of the situation and they have to lead how you go about it. Late stage hoarding disorder clients will most likely be in denial, so we have to stay positive and supportive. Somebody with late stage hoarding disorder, because of the clutter blindness, because of the clutter confusion, and because those items mean so much to them, they're not going to see it as a problem anymore. It stops being an embarrassment and just starts being the way they live. And they will actually get very agitated if somebody kind of disrespects the way they live. they focus on the fact that those are items that they are going to need, and if somebody needs something, they're going to be there for them, and they can do that, but they can't do that if they get rid of those items. Focus on love and concern. When you talk to somebody with hoarding disorder, make sure you are saying, I am worried about you. I am worried that you're not eating the right foods. I am worried that you're going to, have a fire. I am worried that you're not able to maintain your cleanliness. And when you're doing that, offer to help. Do not offer to do, offer to help. If you'd like help with that, let me know. I can definitely help you with that. Why don't we try that? The more you offer to help, the more likely somebody is finally going to say, okay. Whether it is just to quit you from saying, I'll help you, or because they actually want that help, the more you offer, the more likely you are to get that result. There are some things we should not ever do when we have an individual with hoarding disorder. The first one is give an ultimatum. If you love me, you will clean. If you don't clean, I'm leaving. Things like that, they don't work. They will never work. An individual with hoarding disorder cannot choose between people and things. They do not have the ability to differentiate the importance of people versus things. An individual who says or gives an ultimatum is just reinforcing to the individual with hoarding disorder that people cannot be trusted. If this person loved me, they wouldn't tell me to do this. If this person loved me, they wouldn't ask me to get rid of this. And if you give an ultimatum, you have to be willing to follow through, or else it's just an empty threat. So if you are giving that ultimatum, it has to be something that you are willing to do. If you know never talking to this person again isn't realistic, then don't use that as an ultimatum. Do not do a secret cleanup. To an individual with hoarding disorder, or to anybody, honestly, perception is reality. If an individual with hoarding disorder comes home and their house is empty clean, they have every right to press charges for breaking and entering and theft. And in some cases, they will. This also reaffirms the belief that people are not to be trusted. So perhaps this person with hoarding disorder had given you full access to their home. And you come in, clean out all their stuff, they come home and the house is empty. First things first, you may have thrown out money. You may have thrown out thousands of dollars and not even known it. An individual with hoarding disorder, they have a tendency to do, they stuff money in places, typically books, envelopes, just random places. They'll stick money. If you do not know about the money and you start throwing stuff away or donating it, you could actually be throwing away thousands of dollars. Some of their items like jewelry and stuff may also be extremely valuable depending on where they got it, particularly if it's an heirloom. And if you start getting rid of things like that, thinking maybe it's costume jewelry, you could also throw away thousands of dollars. And this is going to lead to severe issues between you and the person with hoarding disorder. You will get a violent outburst at this point, whether it be verbal or physical, if you do a secret cleanup. This also, when you do a secret cleanup, the trauma is so severe to a person that they are going to fill that house back up, if not more, in 6 months or less. Think about, like if you were to come home, say you had 3 kids, and you came home and somebody had done a secret sweep and took your kids. And that same pain and trauma is what an individual with hoarding disorder will feel if they come home and their home is empty. Do not do an ambush clean. if you show up at somebody's door with a bucket and mop and cleaning supplies to clean out their home and they're not ready for it emotionally, it is going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to increase their anxiety. They may feel like they have to say yes, and then it is going to trigger that trauma and that anxiety. Somebody with hoarding disorder, it's pretty easy to tell when they're having an issue. Typically what they'll do is they'll go around and hold their items, start picking up items, carrying them, moving them around, very focused on those items. You will see sweating, you will see shaking. They'll complain of nausea, dizziness. You're going to see sometimes aggression. I have been in a situation where a woman has taken a swing at me because I came in during the middle of a cleanup and she thought I was involved in it. If the person with the hoarding disorder is surprised by cleaning crews, they're probably going to just slam the door in your face. It's going to cause a blow up, and it's really not worth it. It's not worth the trauma that it's going to cause the person, and it's not worth the trauma it's going to cause you as the person that's cleaning. The best way to handle that is to really work with the person and talk to them about cleaning. Maybe it's clearing a space enough to vacuum a portion of the carpet, little bits by little bit. Because one of the things we have to remember is this illness in that house did not get that way overnight. It is not going to get clean overnight. It just won't. An intervention. This is like, you really shouldn't do an intervention, but sometimes it's necessary. I look at it the same way as you would with an individual who is an addict. It's not always the best solution, but sometimes it is necessary. Interventions are generally forced by outside authorities. So if the county code enforcement, state code enforcement, city code enforcement, whatever gets involved, that is when an intervention is really going to have to take place. If there are kids involved, which I didn't even talk about kids, I'm sorry. Outside authority is most likely involved. Children, as an aside, let me hit on kids real fast because I totally didn't even talk about that. It is not child abuse to have a child in the home that is hoarded. The only way it is considered child abuse is if there is no access to clean water, healthy foods, toilet, shower. They have to have a place to play. There has to be a place for them to sleep individually. And if there is an infestation, it has to be treatable. If all of these aspects are, they've managed to hit all of these and it's okay, they are allowed to have children in that hoarded home. And having children in the hoarded home doesn't necessarily mean that the child will become an individual who hoards either. A lot of times you'll see the exact opposite of that, where the child has grown up in a hoarded home and goes to the other extreme, the other minimalist extreme. An intervention is the last resort because it is a major decision. Whatever is said or done in an intervention cannot be unsaid, it cannot be undone, and an apology is not going to fix it. If this happens, the family needs to be okay with their family and friends, workers. They need to be okay with the consequences that happen from that intervention.